The Airbnb of today is not the same as the Airbnb of 15 years ago. It started out as a couch surfing app and is now the largest hotel platform in the world. So that just means it's a lot more ruthlessly competitive. And if you don't position and market your property well, you're gonna end up in a slew of inventory and not make the returns that you thought you would, and maybe not even have a cash flowing investment, have to sell it. And in this market, even selling Airbnbs is really, really competitive. So you definitely need to position your marketing well. I'm Meg. I'm a real estate developer, and I've developed over 200 Airbnb units in Nashville and operated them over the last 10 years. When I first started in Airbnb, I was an entrepreneur living in an apartment in San Francisco and just wanted to make some extra money. So I would rent out my apartment on the weekends when I was out of town, or I would go, stay at my dad's house an hour away, Airbnb out, and just make extra money and defray the cost of my rent so I could get my first company going, which was a real estate development company that I still have today. And so for me, it was actually a really powerful tool that allowed me to have a lot of financial freedom and flexibility when Airbnb had first come out. Since then, I developed buildings in Nashville dedicated to the professional management and delivery of Airbnb. So instead of just being my own apartment that I was living in and renting out, we have units that are dedicated to being able to be Airbnb-able by investors or users. Now, I really think that's evolved as the space has evolved because, as I said before, this started out as like a couch surfing app, and people were thinking of it a lot more along the lines of staying in someone's house. Now that I'm older and I have kids and, I want to stay somewhere that's like more elevated and more professional, more along the lines of a hotel, but there's still a lot of advantages to staying in an Airbnb, like having a washer dryer, having a kitchen, not needing to eat out every meal. If you're with children or a nanny or with a group, you don't want to all be in separate rooms, as an example. So there's a lot of advantages that have evolved over the course of being in, the last 10 or 15 years in Airbnb. And I've really seen and watched how the trends have evolved and how the space has evolved, and tried to address that in all of my real estate development projects. And I have, just seen a lot of insights over the years that I'll share with you. So the first thing is to really decide to be a professional. Even when Airbnb was very casual 15 years ago when I started in San Francisco, I still had all of my, I had my unit professionally cleaned. I had separate linens for Airbnb. I made sure, the closets were cleared out, and if my personal stuff was in there, that it was all locked and that people had a nice place. It was a small studio in a great location in San Francisco, but I, made sure it was always really clean and that there were separate sets of linens, and it was like very professional, even back then. Now the game has gotten, 10 times more professional, to the point where, people aren't living in the places that they're renting out, which makes it even more elevated. My units in particular are definitely on the higher end of Airbnb, which is kind of an emerging market. And no matter what, it's just really, really important that when you're trying to make money on an Airbnb, that you're deciding to be a professional and, really making sure that the guest experience is there. Really, I mean, one of the top things is cleanliness. Like, you really have to be a pro at this to do a good job and have people want to stay with you and give you a good review. So that's kind of the first mindset to start with, is be a professional. And what I mean about being a professional is like really getting in the mindset and making that decision that this is going to be something that is going to provide you with financial prosperity and you need to take seriously and really be a pro at, like, just in general. It's not just something you can like slap up on Airbnb and like hope for good results. You have to be a professional in this industry now. So the second thing is I really would have targeted who my market was from the beginning. So in Nashville, there's a lot of bachelorette parties. We have a Dolly Parton unit as an example that's really targeted towards those bachelorette parties. But it can be anything in whatever area you're in. I also like more of an executive elevated traveler. Like that's an example of something that I've done very well at is that there are people that stay in places longer. You tend to get longer term leases if you capture people that need to be working and living somewhere in a longer period of time. And I really like making sure my units are, more sophisticated, really good coffee, things like that appeal to an elevated traveler. Now, that's just one niche, but whatever your target audience is really what you need to identify from the beginning so that you can make the experience more tailored to them. Because if you just try to slap up a generic product, it just doesn't do as well. So I really think about what is my design, my design expertise, or what do I specialize in that you can really provide at the other end. I've seen people, I have some friends in Nashville who were in the music industry and they've created entire Airbnb units just for artists that come to town that need spaces that are more tailored towards creating music and songwriting and, tailored for a creative experience. So it all depends on what you can offer your person, but it's really important to identify who that target audience is because when I first started, I just kind of put up what I thought was cool, but it didn't really hit home to anyone. And the more we've narrowed in on a specific audience, the better we've done. So once you have your audience identified, the third thing you need to do is really tailor the experience to them and walk through what people need and want to have a good stay. One thing we ruthlessly do is read our reviews and take that feedback and address it and make sure that, we take suggestions that people have if they had, they liked the coffee or they liked the pillows or they really thought this art was cool or whatever it is, and really try to take the feedback and constantly address it and tailor the experience to that specific audience. Because as I said, if you try to do a generic product these days, it's just kind of ends up in a huge slew of inventory. So the fourth thing is hiring professional property management. Now, if you are not dedicated like full time to managing no more than 5 to 10 Airbnbs, then I would definitely hire a professional property management company because you don't realize that people will be wanting to check in at any and all hours of the day, that people will have issues you need to address, and that really affects your reviews. Um, there's a lot of mom and pop, professional companies in all cities, and so I do think it's worth at least hiring a professional management company because, um and you have to do your research because some are much, much better than others, and some will get better returns and won't, so you have to find people that use them and do your research about which ones to use, but it's definitely a full-time job if you wanna have multiple properties, and so you have to either be prepared to be doing that yourself and being available or having someone on your team that's available, or you need to hire a professional management company because that's something that, you know, I was managing my own apartment unit when I would be gone, fine, and I would make sure the cleaning lady came, but, if you wanna make any sort of scale, it does become a much more full-time role. The fifth thing I've learned is to do your market research. So, when I first started doing Airbnb, I just kind of put units up and hoped that, they would rent, and that worked in the beginning because of how I said Airbnb was much, much less competitive, but now with so much product and so many people going into it, you really have to do your research, especially if you're buying or thinking of this as a pure investment. I particularly think Airbnb is better by considering the flexible ownership model where you can have a real estate asset that you use and not just rent out. But if you're looking at it as a pure cash flowing investment, you need to do a lot of market research. That's really easy. You just go on Airbnb and say, okay, I have this unit. Show me other comparable units in the market. If you have a 3-bedroom apartment, look at other 3 bedrooms in your market and see what it rents for at different times of the year. You can also use AirDNA, which is another online software that shows you kind of more historical data about what things have rented for and how the industry changes. But you have to be conservative. Like right now, the hospitality industry just nationally is down. So you have to really weigh and go, okay, how much is the cost of what I'm buying? How much is my mortgage going to be? And how much can I really rent these out for on a conservative basis, depending on what percentage of occupancy is there. So, you know, as an example, I had a 2-bedroom unit in Nashville. I would run it at 50% occupancy just to be conservative, thinking that, any given Thursday through Monday it could be rented, but that there's going to be a couple days a week that aren't there. Then I'm looking at what rate I can get. Okay, well, in Nashville right now, a hotel room that's nicer or in the downtown core is usually around $300. So thinking that your Airbnb is going to be discounted compared to a hotel, if it's a 2-bedroom, I could probably get around $200. And so you just do that math out throughout the year and you go, okay, I'm going to be, running at least a 50% expense ratio compared to what the average rent is. And you calc that out and go, okay, I'm going to be making $50,000 on a $700,000 investment. Is that worth it for me? For a lot of people, it is, especially because that asset's appreciating and they can use it. But you have to really do that market research that's pretty fundamental. I have another video on that before you get involved in something, especially if it's going to be like a financial liability too. The sixth thing I wish I knew is that you can't just assume the market's going to stay constant and you're going to be making the same amount of money each season and year over year. The hospitality market fluctuates, and that's why I really like to think of Airbnb properties as more of like flexible ownership. And I think that they work better, especially if you can use them or if it's your own, residence, if you don't have like a big family or something, like, if you can actually use and stay in a property. I would think of it more as like a flexible ownership asset as opposed to just being a straight cash flowing investment because of how much the hospitality market changes. And the seventh thing I think that I realized or knew, especially after reading so many reviews of all of the buildings that we've built, is that investing in aspects of the guest experience, like simple things like linens and pillows, really makes a big difference. And, cheaping out on really cheap, scratchy, sheets and really cheap pillows just isn't worth it. You're saving such a nominal amount of money, and you need to really invest in that guest experience. And doesn't necessarily even have to cost more, but just kind of having that care factor being added into the experience. Like when someone comes, having like a welcome basket with some coffee. All Airbnbs have coffee, but digging around in some cabinet versus having like a nice note and a welcome basket, which doesn't take that much more effort, really adds to the guest experience. So really like leaning in and making it better than what you would get at a hotel, because that's what you're competing with. Another thing I wish I would have learned is to secret shop my properties. I owned one unit for over a year before I went and stayed there myself. Then I booked it just kind of as a normal person and realized, wow, I need to switch management companies. um, and I went and stayed with my husband. It was loud. The television was broken. The door was left open. The coffee wasn't good. There was no access to creamer, like just little things. So I just secret shopped it myself as just a normal booker against the property management company with the property management company. And that's something you should do like early on, or have, a friend or close colleague go and secret shop for you so that they know, so they don't know. And you can get a real honest experience of what it's going to be like for people. Mapping out the guest experience on paper is also really handy, like, what technology is gonna be used to communicate with them. Obviously, if you're using the Airbnb platform, they have a great interface, but walking that through on paper and really mapping it out is very important. We obsess over all these details. We have professional hotel management company in our buildings. If you are interested to learn more about how we handle this whole process for you, you can reach out and we can connect you with a modernist brand representative. But there's a lot that goes into mapping out this guest experience. Or one thing that I learned people really appreciate is having cool art or unique designs. If your Airbnb is just sort of boring, people aren't drawn to it as much. They want Instagrammable moments. They want to feel like they're somewhere special. They want to feel like they're not in some corporate hotel. So having cool art is something that I learned to incorporate into all of our designs. Another thing that is important that I learned is to offer something unique, especially on the amenities side. A lot of Airbnbs are just houses, but if you can be in a building with like pickleball or a pool in an urban location or, access to certain local activities like golfing, that goes a long way. Another thing that I learned is that you can invest more in like SEO and social media marketing than just what is done on Airbnb. If you depend only on the Airbnb platform, you're not going to perform as well. And it's worth it if you have several properties to really invest in um, more social media and promotion and ads and things like that. There's plenty of companies out there that specialize in that, but that's something that we always do for our properties to make sure we're staying at the top. We've had local influencers stay at our place and, post about our units, like especially if it's a more high profile unit or, a special sort of, like, musician themed unit. We'll have, like, a local musician stay and then post about it. So, we try to be really creative on the marketing side, especially if it's a high grossing unit and it's really worth investing in. Another aspect that is important is that there's those photographable moments so that people can repost and people will even tag your unit and create a lot more of that internet traffic, which is great. We add QR codes or tag the name of our Instagram handle with our listings and with the reviews for people so that they can see and repost, and it's just good for driving traffic to your unit. And then lastly, it's just really making sure that you're looking at reviews and handling any negative reviews and handling why that was negative, because that's your best feedback. And as soon as you start getting negative reviews or you get a lot of positive reviews, that will be the difference to where Airbnb puts your unit in their algorithm and what people can, click on. So, in our buildings, we actually have a licensing agreement with Airbnb, so we've learned a lot about, how they rank units and things like that. But it's really, really important. I'd say one of the top things is making sure you have good reviews. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to find more about how I've invested in Airbnb and the truth about short-term rentals in 2025, please watch this next video.